have uncovered curious drawings of an archaic sun. They do not look like our sun, yet they are strangely similar. And most mysterious of all is the great crescent encircling the sphere of this enigmatic sun. Early Egyptian drawings place crescent horns on the sun god Ra. In Mesopotamia, the crescent is repeatedly drawn wrapped around the sun god Shamash. A crescent horn turning in the sky. The image appears throughout the world. A vast crescent, unlike anything in our own sky today.
Sun that we have now was not so visible when Saturn was the sun. And if you read Hesiod and Homer and Virgil, Ovid and all of those greats, even John Milton and Dante Alighieri, you'll find that their works reminisce about a time when Saturn ruled the Golden Age. And he did. It was the central sun of the solar system. And the sun that we have now was, just a secondary player. And it appeared virtually out of nowhere around about 15,000 years. That's not my information, by the way. That's what I've read up on. And the scientists at Thunderbolts, I love that group of guys, because they're really onto the mythology for looking for truth. But a good video to look at is Symbols of an Alien Sky. They've got a lot of good videos there. Wallace Thornhill's a great speaker and explains the electric nature of the universe. But when Saturn then fell, his son Jupiter took over the reins, you see. Jupiter is Zeus, and Zeus castrated Kronos, remember? Defeated Kronos, his father Saturn. And according to all the mythologies, that was the day when harshness entered into the world. And in fact, Hesiod says in the Theognis, I think it is, or Works and Days. But anyway, Hesiod writes that Jupiter brought the 4 seasons and the suffering of the 4 seasons, but Saturn maintained 1 season. And how that happened is explained very well at the people on the internet at thunderbolts.info. And they've got all the videos there that explain the coaxial relationship between the Earth and Saturn. And coaxial orbits are where planets are lined up like a string, like like a rosary necklace or something like that. They're all on the one axis. And so that was the arrangement of the planets. And there's other arrangements, of course. There's orbital arrangements, there's phase lock arrangements like between the moon and the Earth, etc. So this was a very, very powerful and strong hierarchy that we had in the heavens, and a very different configuration to what we have today. But something happened in the past, and the atom that we call Adam, which is Amun and Aten, etc., our sun, has lost some particles and gained some other ones, just like electrons do when they discharge particles and become negative and positive ions. The same thing happens with solar systems. They lose particles, they gain particles, they change. Nothing is the same forever. If one thing is true, is that there will always be movement.
Which is just a shadow of the former epoch called the Golden Age of Kronos. But who was this ancient god, Kronos? All Greek astronomical traditions agreed that Kronos was the planet Saturn. Our own name for the planets came from the Romans. In unison, Roman poets and historians insisted that in a former time Saturn had ruled as a god-king, producing a paradise on Earth. It would be almost impossible to overstate the power of this memory among the different cultures. For the Babylonians, the Hebrews, and the Greeks, the most sacred day of the week was the Sabbath, a ritual remembrance of the lost epoch. And in each of these cultures, this holiest day was the day of Saturn, the Latin Saturnidis, or Saturn's Day, the Celtic day of Ceter, our Saturday, of the planet Saturn. And the Greeks were not alone. The Babylonian Shamash, always translated as sun, was identified as Saturn. So also the Egyptian Ra, the Hindu Surya, the Latin Sol. But Saturn is a mere dot in a starry expanse. What could have caused the first star worshippers to celebrate that minute speck as the sun?
There's rivalry between those two planets, and it's usually portrayed as two brothers, twin brothers, or a male and a feminine aspect. For instance, Jesus and Mary Magdalene, or Jesus and Satan, you see. And Saturn always gets to play the negative part, because Saturn is, the relationship between Saturn and the Sun is this. The Sun is the primary of the solar system right now, but probably around about 15,000 years ago it was Saturn. And Saturn, according to the scientists at thunderbolts.info, Wallace Thornhill and those guys there, the position of Saturn was in a northerly position. It was the sun of this solar system, and it was in a coaxial relationship with the Earth, and in between Saturn and the Earth there was Venus and Mars. So it was a coaxial relationship, you see, and Saturn was always in the northern heavens as the sun of this solar system. Then 15,000 years ago there was a switch. This sun turns up. Now, Saturn's orbit takes 29.5 years, and that's the magic number, because it relates to the sun in 29.5 year cycles, just as the moon relates to the Earth in 29.5 day cycles. So you see this powerful relationship between the Earth and the moon, the sisters, Isis and Nephthys, you know, and they are in a phase lock sort of orbit with each other, but it's very powerful. And the moon is very influential over this orb, the Earth, her sister, and it causes the tides and things like that, or at least it affects that. And we see the effect of the moon with people on full moons, with insanity and etc., all of those things. Well, Saturn does the same with the sun, and astrologers know that when Saturn is in transit, meaning when Saturn is in a position in your birth chart where you might have some certain frictions like afflictions. Okay, now this is astrological language, but it's still science. When Saturn comes to those returns, those transits and stuff like that, people notice it. They notice it. People who are aware. Not the average person, they don't know anything about this, but astrologers know the effect of Saturn. They know the effect of the moon, primarily. These two are the most powerful, without a doubt, in the solar system and in astrology. So, but in mythology you'll find that one is electric and one is magnetic. Alright, it's always like that. The relationship is always like that. And I'm pointing out the fact that El, which is the word, well, electricity derives from El. El is one of those words that turns up in the mythologies all the time. You have Emmanuel, Israel, the Bible, Babel, the bell for Baal that you have in the chapel and steeple and cathedral, and you go to the altar to worship El or Allah. All of these El words that have to do with masculinity, because the letter El is lamed in Hebrew and it is erect. It is the male phallic, the obelisk. So, and that is pretty much the sun. It's a sundial, and the sun is phallic. El, Elohim, or Elios. But Saturn also gets the title of El. So there's always this friction between. Saturn is known as Baal, or Baal, or Bel, or just plain old El. And you see, Jesus was called in Matthew 1, verse 23, and the virgin shall give a child, and we shall call his name Emmanuel. Well, Emmanuel, Jesus Emmanuel, that is, he's got a friend, a dark friend called Magdalene. Interesting about that, isn't it? El and Mag, electricity and magnetism. So you see how these characters turn up. And by the way, Mary Magdalene, Mary's a dead giveaway. Mary is maritime, marine, all those water words. M is the crest of the wave, actually. The water, the waves, M. And in fact, the Hebrew letter M, mem, for M, means water. So, and they stole that off Egyptian hieroglyphs. Now, the ancients spoke about electricity and magnetism as fire and water. You see, that's why Jesus, J-E-S, is
God. In later times, the first astronomers identified this overarching ruler of the sky. They claimed it was the planet Saturn, remembered as the owner of the cosmic wheel before the god departed for distant realms. The astronomical traditions also name the central star as Venus, the mother goddess, and they name the darker reddish sphere as the planet Mars, the cosmic warrior. In these 3 hours, I intend to demonstrate that the stories of the gods are the stories of what happens to these celestial bodies. You're looking at reconstructed images of a formation in the heavens just a few thousand years ago. The configuration evolved through many phases, evoking reverence and awe, a model for kings and kingdoms for thousands of years. Great temples and cities and sacred mountains all pointed back to the mythic age of gods and wonders. Let the world's first astronomers point the way for us. They knew that what the myths and hymns and prayers called gods were planets and aspects of planets. Planets appeared close to the Earth in a heaven-spanning configuration. Memories of that celestial splendor still surround us, even if humanity later forgot much more than it remembered. Reconnecting with our forgotten past will be essential for our own cultural integrity, essential for the study of human consciousness, and essential for all of the sciences.
Which means the sun or fire. Fire and water is in the myths and people are missing it. And it turns up in these words. I can go on about that. There's many other words. They're all there. Ra and gra, radiation and gravity. Same as, because electricity radiates, And magnetism gravitates, or is grave. You've got levity and gravity. You see? And with the Saturnian cult, a lot of cubes turn up. You know, you see cubes. For instance, the Muslims, the Islamists go to Kaaba for the Kaaba. You see, and they go anti-clockwise around Saturn, just like the rings of Saturn. You see, they're just basically, Saturn is the Kaaba, the black Kaaba. And the Jews also wear the little black box on their foreheads and everything. That's the same thing. Monuments all around the world, as you mentioned, the one in Parliament here in Australia, we have the box, the Kaaba. It turns up everywhere where the Saturnian cult like to leave reminders of their cult, you see, and their power, and where they are, and where they dominate, and where they rule. They like to sort of, like the animals that like to mark their territory, you see. It also turns up in our institutions, you see, when they give you on graduation day the square and the round black hat, and they dress you in black. This is all Saturnian. And they give you your master's degrees, you know, you become, you get the degrees. What are these degrees? Well, the word degrees is one, because it has to do with 360 degrees, and last time I checked they were angles, and last time I checked angles has to do with angels. So the language of angels happens to be the language of angles, which happens to be the angles that go around the circle, the degrees that you get when you get your master's degrees. Only the people who have their master's degrees don't know anything about the angles or the angels. So that's what the language of the angels is. It's astrology, as above, so below. As the orbs go around that circle, by degrees, you see the sun travels 1 degree every day, and it does these 365 degrees, and finally it goes around the circle. Well, every one of those angles is an angel, and those 365 angels are looking after us, because they are different angles of emanation of vibration from the sun. Now, the sun being the chief life giver, if he's changed his position every day into a different angle, well, then that's going to affect us, because we are directly sucking its energy. We are directly in its sphere. We're in the solar system, so we are just absolutely absorbing every photon that comes on every particular day, on a different angle, every day of the year. And people don't notice it because they're not looking. But the astrologer does, because he's looking for these, and he sees them, and he charts the course of the planets, and so he knows what they're doing.
Just a few thousand years ago, our ancestors witnessed a gathering of planets close to the Earth. An explosion of human imagination occurred, an outpouring of mythology and symbolism that defined cultures for thousands of years. Long after the celestial provocation itself was forgotten. In these early historical times, there are no records of the present planets, no diaries recording planetary motions or periods. Planets as we know them today did not exist. These were the gods, awe-inspiring, and at times capricious and terrifying. Early star worshippers speak of a great light of heaven, motionless in the sky, the Egyptian Atum or Atum Ra, the Sumerian On, the Babylonian Anu. And enigmatically, early astronomers knew the overarching figure as the planet Saturn, whose story will be a centerpiece of our third episode. In the beginning, the gathered powers were not seen as separate gods, but as the primeval unity of heaven, the perfect conjunction, or great conjunction of the Golden Age. A massive sphere hung in the sky, and in its center stood a radiant star surrounded by explosive streamers. Cultures the world over came to see this star in feminine terms as the mother goddess, the planet Venus. Remembered as the great star, the mother of all stars. This was the central eye, heart, and soul of the primeval sun, his animating life, power, and glory, and much more. One of the most enigmatic cultural themes is the transformation of the life-giving goddess into a monstrous form, attacking the world. This was the terrible goddess, raging in the sky with wildly disordered hair, or multiple flailing arms, a celestial spectacle radiating a paralyzing light. When instability and displacement occurred, the streamers discharging from Venus grew chaotic, giving the planet a frightful countenance. The angry goddess was a comet, the mythic prototype of comets. Immanuel Velikovsky's great comet, the planet Venus. Seen in front of this central star was a smaller, darker, reddish sphere. This was the mythic warrior, the masculine heart of the heart, the child in the womb, the child on the lap, the pupil of the eye, the axle of the cosmic wheel, the most active figure of world mythology. Sky worshippers everywhere knew the identity of this warrior, the victor over dragons and chaos monsters. This global identity of Mars as the greatest of warriors shouts to us an unrecognized history. On the great sphere of heaven, a bright crescent appeared, with the orb or star of Venus between its horns. Things never seen in our sky were once revered around the world. As the Earth rotated on its axis, the crescent marked out a cycle of day and night. Crescent below in the phase of greatest brightness, crescent above in the phase of dimming, Though our sun was present, casting its light on the configuration, it was not itself.
Find your way through all of that. You need to develop a relationship with something that's profound. And you can. You have that capacity. And what could be more profound than the truth? And what would you rather have on your side? And to do more than your best. Because your best isn't enough. Because your best isn't as good as you could be. You have to push yourself past that. And that's, as far as I can tell, where you find what you need in life. You find the meaning that sustains you in life, and you find the patterns of action that redeem the world. Nietzsche said that you could tell much about a man's character by how much truth he could tolerate, which is very interesting. You know, there's an idea in the great Western tradition that the truth is the way and the path of life, and that no one comes to the Father except through the truth. And I believe that to be the case, because I don't think that you can manifest who you are without the truth. And so I think it's literally and metaphorically true that the pathway to who you could be if you were completely who you were is through the truth. And so the truth does set you free, but the problem is that it destroys everything that isn't worthy in you as it sets you free, and that's a process of burning. And it's painful because you cling to what you shouldn't be, partly out of pride and partly out of ignorance and partly out of laziness. And so then you encounter something true, and you all know this perfectly well, because when was the last time that you learned something important that wasn't a blow of some sort, you know? And it's often you look back in your life and you think, oh God, I really learned something there. I wouldn't want to do that again, but it really changed my life. I mean, sometimes it can really destroy you, you know, an encounter with the truth, and you never really recover. But now and then something comes along and straightens you out, and a lot of you has to go. A lot of you has to burn away. You know, and I suppose in some sense the idea is that everything about you that isn't worthy is to be put into the flames. And that's another reason to be not so casual about claiming what you believe, because it isn't something that you undertake without due caution. You know, I learned when I was a kid, about 25 or so, a little older than a kid, that almost everything that I said was one form of lie or another. And I wasn't any worse, I would say, than the people that I was associating with, or any better. And the lies were manifold, you know. They were attempts to win arguments for the sake of winning the argument. That might be one. Attempts to indicate my intellectual prowess when there were competitions of that sort. Maybe just the sheer pleasure of engaging in an intellectual argument and winning. My inability to distinguish between ideas that I had read and incorporated because I had read but hadn't realized that I hadn't yet earned the right to use, all of that. And, you know, I had this experience that lasted a long time. Well, I would say it's really never gone away. And I think this was the awakening of my conscience, essentially. This voice, for lack of a better word, made itself manifest inside me, and it said every time I said something that wasn't true, and that's usually what it said. That's not true. You don't believe that. Or there was a sensation that was associated with it. I don't think this is that uncommon, you know. I asked my psychology classes for many years in a row if they had an experience, that they had a voice in their head, let's say, it's a metaphor, or a feeling that communicated to them when they were about to do something wrong. And it was universally the case that people agreed with one of those statements or another. And the other thing I would ask is, well, do you always listen to it? And of course the answer to that was definitely no.
SDO AIA 171 filter on the SDO spacecraft. down here on the southeastern limb of the sun. Got a humongous plasma vortex extending from the sun out into the corona. And in the corona, there appears to be a round sphere, possibly two. If you look back here in the back behind this one, this loop is from yesterday and then up to today. See one start to form back here as the Earth passes between the satellite and the sun. I guess that's the Earth. I've never seen it do acrobatics quite like that. I'm not saying the Earth did acrobatics. See how it's horizontal and vertical. But nevertheless, it's told to me that that's the Earth. So it is what it is. But what are we looking at here? This round sphere, right? There goes a magnetic filament. And then it's just right there. It's totally obvious. I'm going to put the magnifier on it, so please bear with me. The screen's going to go white. And there it is. That's the plasma vortex. Kind of reminds me of an umbilical cord that's feeding a plasma sphere. Totally new one to me. It's very, very interesting to say the least. So it'll be worth keeping an eye on for sure. I don't know if we're witnessing something extraordinary here. It is to me. I've never seen anything like that. That's clearly a round sphere that has some sort of energy of its own to be able to do that up against the sun and the corona. It's also visible on the SOHO spacecraft. You can see it right down here. I'm going to put the magnifier on it one more time. You can see it down there too. And this is through a different filter. I believe this one's the 304. Yeah. So anyway, here's Sun's Flares video, breaking unidentified object, sun, March 11th, 2012. And you can see it clearly there on his too. So I don't know if we're witnessing something extraordinary here, guys, or exactly what do you call this, but I don't know. It's very, very interesting. Almost looks like the sun's given birth to a planet. I'm not saying it's a planet yet, but it's got to start somehow. Starts out as a sphere, and then, you know, she releases the umbilical cord, and away it goes. Starts collecting cosmic dust, and many, many years later, you have a planet. Just a